Well, happy Monday. I hope you have a good week this week. And I wanted to say this is some more of the problems I help people with through my website. These are all 90s cars, but 90s cars need to be fixed too. And I don't know how many cars I see running around out there from the 80s and 90s, because cars are so expensive now. You're paying more for a car now than people were paying for houses. This house that I'm sitting in right here was bought in 1971 for $19,000. There's not many cars you can buy for that. Even used cars, used pickup trucks are super expensive now. $39,000, $40,000. So I wanted to go ahead and jump into some of this stuff because this may help somebody. These things, and I'm going to give you a pretty good bit of detail on each one of these. This Grand Cherokee, 4-liter, 220,000 miles, cranks no start. Okay, so this is him giving me, the guy told me everything he had done. He actually worked pretty hard trying to find this himself before he came asking for help. And he checked his, it's actually that reference voltage going into the these sensors, the speed sensor for the cam sensor, crank sensor, and the vehicle speed sensor is as a 9-volt reference voltage on these Chrysler products. But he said 8-volt plus. Fuel pressure, he measured that. Coil, he says, well, may have a weak spark. Disconnected battery cable, comb. The ohm checked the coil good at home, and it checked good at AutoZone. And they replace the cap, rotor, and plug wire set. A lot of times people like to do what they know how to do. In other words, they'll change the parts they know how to change, hoping that will fix the problem they're looking for. Now you put a coil back in it, checked input, 12 volts, make sure he's getting enough. See, he was basically doing some comprehensive testing here. Put a new plug wire on it, no start, sparks to engine, not to the plug or the cap tower. Now think about that for a minute. It was sparked to the engine, but not to the plug, because it's having to go through the wires and jump across the gap on the plug. So he said, and that's in compression, right? In other words, whenever the cylinder's under compression, it's harder for that spark to jump. Is it possible for the coil to ohm out good and still be bad? So they're leaning toward a new coil. All right. What I said was, good voltage going in, replace the coil. I like to stretch that spark until it's about an inch and looks scary as all get out. Bop, 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 bop. And if I see a real weak spark that goes away when I stretch it after about a 3/8 or a half an inch, I've seen hard starting problems because of a coil that was a little bit weak too. But anyway, he'd done good diagnostics and all, and his follow-up was to new coil, so much better, rounds out the book info. So basically he's the book used to say if the spark would jump a 1/4 of an inch, that was good enough. That's just not the way it is, and I don't think it ever has been. I've seen some really good mechanics get smacked around because they saw that 1/4 inch spark jump and thought everything was okay when it wasn't. And they'd see that 1/4 inch spark jump, then they'd go off in another direction whenever they should have made it stretch a little farther. I had a student that did that when I put him over there at the one of the dealerships. He's working at a Nissan dealership, and they had him working on a Cadillac. And he called me and said that he pulled it into his stall and do an oil change. It wouldn't start afterwards, and he checked for spark. And I said, what did it look like? And he told me it was orange, and it was only about, and I said, well, yeah, I've told you about that in class. Put a coil on it, and he did, and it fired up, This one here is running hot. It's a 90 model GMC pickup. A lot of people love to have one of these things, these old tanks here. Love these trucks. I take a picture of one whenever I see it. You might have seen some. Well, the engine was well maintained, burns a little oil, always starts. Thermostat replaced, the vehicle still runs in the high temperature range, runs around 210 when the outside temperature is 75 degrees, but around 220 when it's 80 degrees or higher. Now that's not terribly hot, but when he's going 75 to 80 miles an hour with a lot of air coming through the radiator, it goes above 235, and he turns the air conditioner off, which stops that hot refrigerant from going through the condenser. That cools it off a little bit. But he's uncomfortable with the temperature it's running. Now, 220 is a little bit hot, but it's not engine destroying hot. You know, you get above about 240 degrees, you're in some danger there. Some of the Chevrolet vehicles that have electric coolant fans on them, when I would look to see when the coolant fan was supposed to come on, the coolant fan would supposed to come on at 228 on some of them, so go figure on that. So he said in Florida 95 yesterday with high humidity. So I told him, I says, so I start by having the radiator removed and cleaned, inside and out. I've actually cleaned radiators on the outside, just took them and, you know, gently hit them with a pressure washer and washed all the crud out from between the flues and made one cool down like that. Replace the radiator would probably be wiser, have the block flushed. Two ideas. So if you hadn't had the water pump replaced, you might have an internally cavitated pump or eroded impeller, I told him. Cavitation of the reaction surface of the impeller spins next to will cause a reduced pump. Okay, probably a stack up of several factors. I've seen that kind of thing where everything's contributing a little bit to the problem. When you get that done, you shouldn't see a difference. All that stuff needs to be done anyway on a truck this old with this many miles on it. I had often said that, particularly on these vehicles with plastic radiators, we probably ought to start replacing the radiators, you know, probably at like 125,000 miles. It wouldn't be a bad idea to replace a radiator, just because if those plastic tanks split, it's an engine ending deal there. Well, his follow-up, and he sent this picture, he decided to replace the radiator, and that solved the problem. Stays under 200 no matter what the driving condition. Now that's a little bit too cool. He probably put a cooler thermostat in it than he should have. When we cut the old radiator open, and that's what it looked like there. And he, you know, sent me a picture of his new radiator in there. Thanks for the advice. That's Dodge Neon. It's had a input-output speed sensor that was bad. And, you know, so you get a diagnostic test at Amco transmission place, and they gave her a printout and said that was a problem. She didn't want to pay them $300 to fix it, and I figured if they could do it, maybe get some of my friends to fix it. So she wanted to know how you change the speed sensor. Wanted instructions on how to do it. Well, these things are downright easy, because they're just them plastic things, and they're right down here on the side. You know, here and here, wait a minute, there and there, and I actually sent her this picture and that picture right there, and she says, so her fiance and her did it over the weekend in about 30 minutes, and the shop was going to charge her $300, you know, and I'm all about helping somebody if they can do something fairly easily themselves. Now, there's some things that do-it-yourself people don't need to fool with, unless they're really good do-it-yourselfers. I mean, there's some things, sometimes I won't even give anybody any instructions if they're wanting to do something that's going to be dangerous or might get them hurt, because the last thing I want to do is give somebody some kind of advice that causes them some sort of pain or loss, you know. Say, well, they got the inspections passed today, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how that speed sensor must have been throwing a code or something that was keeping her from getting her emissions inspection passed. He didn't elaborate on that. Here's another 93 Grand Cherokee. Front passenger side studs for the lugs keep breaking. He's replaced the rim studs, the lugs, and rotor. It broke again. What should be causing this? And he just kept having one problem after another. I knew a guy that got a brand new 71 Chevelle way back when, and he put some fancy chrome wheels on it, you know, and the wheels kept coming off of it going down the road. And what he didn't realize was, and of course I told him, I says, they should be torqued to about 100 foot-pounds, no more. How many times does this happen, and how long is it between incidents? Okay, so he says he got it a month ago. About a week after he got it, was the first time they broke. Took it to a shop, had it fixed. Somebody probably got rid of the thing because it was giving him this trouble, you see. About 2 weeks after that, he checked them. They were loose, all the lugs. So he took a four-way and tied them down again. Drove 30 miles, checking them every now and then. Last night, when he got ready to head home, he had 2 lugs and 2 studs left. That's bad. So it's open, and of course it's wallering the holes out in the rims and all that. And he wanted to know what to do. And I says, are they factory wheels or chrome aftermarket wheels? The wrong lug nuts, different degree on the bevel, whatever, will cause them to repeatedly come loose like that. Make sure the lug nuts. That's what was going on with that guy's car, that 71 Chevelle. He was using the original lug nuts to hold these aftermarket wheels, and the bevel was wrong. And I said, take one of the non-problem wheel lug nuts to the dealer and just get 5 just like it. And so this is an illustration, and I actually made this better than it used to be. I had another illustration I made similar to this. Some of them have a ball seat, some of them have the flange, some of them have, stamped steel wheel usually have this 45 degree, and the aluminum wheel will have a 60 degree taper. And if you put something like with this kind of taper on a wheel like this, or vice versa, or anything else, it's going to come loose. That's just all there is to it. And I have seen some students say, well, when I was teaching, I would say, take the wheel off this car, do whatever, and put it back on. They would put the lug nuts back on backwards with the bevel side out. And I was thinking, I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't remember how lug nuts went on. This is ridiculous. And I used to, I would take pictures of that every now and then and say, don't do this. This 94 Camaro had a wiper problem. Whenever they turned off the wipers, it would stop in the upright position. You ever see that on a Crown Victoria? It needs a wiper motor. But on this one here, there is a circuit board. So he said, do I need a new wiper motor, blah, blah. So I says, this is a wiper motor problem. Try the board. You can buy this board, and will usually fix those wipers when they're doing crazy stuff like that, or when they're not working at all, or when they're running all the time, or something like that. He didn't understand when I told him try the board first. He says he didn't understand what I meant by that. So basically I was saying you can't check the board, but you can buy one. And the part number at Cardone is 8110112BP, and it costs about $45. That's how much it cost back then. I think they're more than that now by about like $100 now. But it's easy to replace, contains the part contacts and the circuits that drive intermittent wipers. There are several different ways that these things are built, and you can actually buy one from one vendor that's for the same motor, and they look different as far as their circuits, the way they're designed, but they will still work. But you got to make sure you're getting the right one that they built for that vehicle. And so anyway, he took care of that. I suppose I never heard from him again. This one would be cool. 98 Honda Accord 6-cylinder intermittent starting problems. Engine cranks but don't start. Happens with no warning. Sometimes weeks elapse between failures. So every time after calling AAA and getting the car towed to the mechanic shop, the car starts immediately, and my mechanic cannot diagnose a problem. He's like, I don't see a problem here. And I said, okay, some of you guys probably already know this. This is a silver bullet. It's fixed just about every Honda I've seen with that problem. This $50 relay that you find under the dash, over on the left side typically, looks like this, and it's got 2 relays built into one, is what it amounts to. And it basically operates the fuel pump and turns on the engine controller computer. And so either one of these parts of this relay can be bad and can prevent it from starting. And every time I've ever seen a Honda that had an intermittent no start problem, if you swapped out this relay, it would take care of it. Now I'm not saying that's always going to be, it might be other problems, but this is a very, very common failure on those Hondas. 95 Toyota Camry, 4-cylinder automatic. And when I come to a red light, puts pressure on the brakes, and after hitting the brake I continue to apply pressure to keep the car from moving. Once the car stops, I can feel it and see my foot moving deeper. The brake pedal's falling out from under his foot. When it happens, the car starts to move and it stops immediately within a second or less, and that is pretty cool. And it's like this. I took this video on my Explorer when it had a bad master cylinder. See that pedal just keeps going down? Alright, you can hit it a second time and it does okay. Then when you mash it, it'll just slide, it falls out from under your foot. And so that was, and I told him, I says, and you got a bad master cylinder. Let me know what happens. And so this guy right here was pretty sharp. He pulled the master cylinder off, tore it apart, looked at the cups in there on the little piston, and found the problem with one of the seals had a little nick out of it. And so he tried to find the seals only, but they wouldn't sell them that way. So he had to buy a new master cylinder, cost 60 bucks plus tax. I put a master cylinder on a 70 model Ford truck I had one time, and the master cylinder was $14 and the core charge was $18. The core charge was more than the actual part, which I thought was kind of funny. A 2000 Jeep Grand Cherokee said my electric fan's staying on all the time. Father's a retired mechanic, hooked up a switch for me to manually turn the fan on and off. He's stumped. We think this is an electrical problem. Well, yeah. Before I hand it over to an electrical tech, I wanted to ask if you knew what it might be. He changed the heating module. I don't know what that means. And the thermostat, and it wasn't that. We'll appreciate any help you can give us. Heating module. I'm not sure what a heating module is. Well, this is what I told her. Cooling fan relay, solid state, kind of hidden. It could be the problem. I've seen that before on these. So she said, "Hey, my Jeep's all fixed. Thanks for your advice." That's what the thing. That's what this thing looks like. Saying and I pretty well showed her where it was mounted. And it's a little bit annoying to get to, but not that bad, you know. So 95 TBird won't start. I had a TBird with 4.6, started stuttering, lost all power. Fuel pump wasn't putting out enough pressure, so he replaced it. Still wouldn't run. Checked the spark. It was sparking. Checked the coils. One wasn't reading anything, but the other reads 12.2 ohms resistance. Went to the junkyard, got another coil that reads 12.2. Read the book. They're supposed to be between 13 and 14 ohms. They're sparking, though. They are sparking. So ordered a cam sensor because the code popped up for it once before all this. Now the car still won't start. All the plugs are wet. It smells like gas. Really strong when he cranks on it. Puts new plugs and wires in. Replace the crank sensor. Firing order's right. I think it's a spark problem because I tried starting fluid and it didn't change anything. See, he's really digging into this thing, trying to figure it out. And I says, okay, we know you're getting fuel. You know, I'm assuming you checked the pressure with a gauge. We know you got fuel injection because the injectors clicking because these plugs are wet. Next, we know you got spark. It should be good and strong, able to jump about an inch. We know you have good spark plugs because you replaced them. All these elements won't fire leads us to look deeper in other places besides spark, fuel, and electronics. My next question is, did it start skipping and quit on the same day? Or had you noticed a loss of power for a while, a few weeks, days before it finally died? And then I said, if the exhaust is totally clogged, it can keep it from starting. That's the question about how long you've been experiencing symptoms. And I said, if I was in your shoes, I'd be checking compression to see if there was some kind of timing chain issue. Low compression on one or more cylinders would point in this direction. But he'd already eliminated a lot of stuff. So this was his follow-up. He said, "Oh, thank you for helping me solve this problem." He did a compression test, and the compression was all over the place, even though the engine had been rebuilt. He still might have timing chain issues. It turned out the catalytic converters are the problem. He unbolted the exhaust pipes, and it fired up. So I had seen that. I told it about that one time before. Whenever my buddy, I told him to pull 3 of the plugs out of a 6-cylinder, and it fired up when it sounded like a machine gun. Incidentally, this is a kind of a funny story. I'm going to close right here at the end. I was going to tell you the older Jeeps had a cam sensor, but in the distributor, but that cam sensor did not, on the older Jeeps, the old 4 liters that were like 87 to 90 rather, you could disconnect that cam sensor and the engine would still have spark and fuel injection and all that. But on the newer ones, if the cam sensor goes dark, it won't work right. It won't start a lot of time. But this one here, my buddy Philip was one of the guys that I worked with over there. Philip Kirkland was his name. He went out to the service lot, and there was a bunch of gas. I don't know why, but there was gas in the cylinders, and he could tell it was trying to hydraulic lock. So he pulled all the plugs out. He's going to blow that gas out of those cylinders out there in the parking lot. and he pulled the plug wires off because it was a distributor. He unplugged the wires at the distributor thinking he was killing the ignition system, but the ignition system gets its trigger from the crank sensor back there on the bell housing. So he unplugs the cam sensor at the distributor, and he spins it over with all that gas blowing out of there. And he said that thing was sparking and lighting that gas off, and it looked like an anti-aircraft gun firing 6 rounds up into the sky. Anyway, he didn't set the thing on fire, but he almost did. But that just tickled me every time I think about it, because he was telling me about how that looked out there, and it scared the daylights out of him. Well, I want you guys to have a good week. This has only been a 20-minute video, and I hope you had time to watch it all the way through. And we'll see you next time.